Hello, everybody, and welcome to the November 27th, 2018 edition of the Ephrom Josine Show. I am your host, Ephrom Josine. Anyway, a lot of news has happened, and unfortunately, yesterday I only covered the caravan, but don't worry, there's more news to talk about. Our first story has to do with the nation of Iran. This is a nation that the entire Donald Trump administration is reminding us is basically part of the axis of evil. You know, John Bolton hates it, Michael Flynn hated it, all the others hated it. Right? James Mattis really hates it. Donald Trump thinks it's going to kill us. So what has he done? He's gotten rid of the Iran deal. He has basically broke parts of it, including the part that says that they can't put on more sanctions, also known as the only restriction on the United States. Well, it turns out those evil Iranis are complying with the deal perfectly. Despite the fact they don't even have to, considering the deal has been broken. They have, according to the UN, still not attempted to build a nuke. Or attempted any nuclear weapons for that matter, or any weapons that are banned in the Iran deal. They have not done anything to violate the deal, yet the United States keeps putting sanctions on them. Can we just talk about how that's going to hurt international relations? I mean, at this point, what's the point of making a deal with the US when apparently we can just sort of break them, but don't you dare break them? And of course, nowhere on mainstream media has been covering this. Although, to be fair, some are better than others. Here's a picture that was posted on Twitter. CNN last night talks about how Trump doesn't believe climate reports. MSNBC talks about how GM is cutting thousands of jobs. Fox News talks about Barbara Streisand. I don't even remember who that is. Oh, some singer lady. Huh. She's also responsible for the term Streisand effect. Also, that's a little interesting. And she was in Meet the Fockers. I immediately don't care. Again. Sorry. But you know what? Let's talk about those stories. The two important ones, not the whoever she was ones. That Guy Benson. Who, on a side note, what kind of first name is Guy? But I'm getting off topic. I think we should start off with the climate change one because, yes, Donald Trump is handing climate reports that he does not believe in. He is refusing to acknowledge his own EPA generals and secretaries and his own scientists' words. He also is only releasing climate reports at suspicious times, such as, for instance, releasing one on Thanksgiving weekend when most people would be distracted. Makes you think, doesn't it? Again, this is the administration that hasn't even appointed a new EPA secretary because the acting one already has worked for coal companies. And that is after he fired Scott Pruitt, the head of the EPA, who sued the EPA over a dozen times. Just, my God, the corruption is so obvious and some people still just can't see it. Anyway, the next part of this episode was going to be a column Matt Walsh wrote about transgenderism that asks some questions everyone has answered, however, he thinks no one has answered because he's Matt Walsh. However, then I saw Shapiro write this in the National Review, and I'm thinking we haven't covered Shapiro really as much recently. Like, last week, almost every episode was about Walsh. So, you know what? We'll throw Shapiro in too, and we'll just read this. I haven't read this yet. This is a blind read. Because I'm going to surprise myself. Last week, a member of my Orthodox Jewish congregation approached me at the synagogue to tell me a story. Many of the women in the congregation exercise at a female-only gym for modesty purposes. Fascinating. The gym is successful. Its main constituency is religious women who don't wish to be stared at by men, or to see men in various states of undress. Ooh, the best, the real fun people. According to the congregation member, this month, a transgender woman, a biological man who suffers from gender dysphoria, at least we're there, or he's willing to call them transgender women. You see, Ben is progressing a little. By this time next decade, he may just be able to call them women. Who knows? I will actually say that is kind of important for the description, so I'm not faulting him there. I just want to make a joke. Came to the gym. This man who retains his male biological characteristics, just say he has a dick, dude. Then entered the locker room and proceeded to disrobe. Actually, fun fact, did you know there's no actual law that says that those signs on bathrooms mean anything? I mean, I still think you should use the one of your assigned sex, don't get me wrong. Unless you do suffer from dysphoria, in which case it gets a little more complicated. But there's no law saying you can't do that, is what I'm saying. Maybe there should be, who knows? When told by management that he could use a private dressing room, he refused, announcing that he was a woman and could disrobe in front of all the other women. This guy does sound a little bit like a creep, but most honest-to-God trans people would not do that. They're typically very ashamed of their body. That's why they want it to be changed to look more like the one of the opposite sex. You idiot. The predictable result, many of the actual biological women, why not just say biological at that point? Like, now you're just stretching it. Began canceling their memberships. When the management asked people higher in the chain, they were simply told that to require the man to use a private dressing room or to reject the membership would be subject the company to litigation and possible boycott, as opposed to what was already happening? What do you think a boycott is? This company sounds stupid, is what I'm getting at. Simply measure whether or not the boycott would be more or less worth what they already are getting, and for the record, by the sounds of it, it sounds like more people would go there then. Because these people sound kind of like prudes, honestly. So the gym will simply have to lose its chief client because a man with a mental disorder believes he has the right to disrobe in front of women. Just, why are you always using, like, the proper English? Everything about you bothers me, I swear to God. As it turns out, there are indeed public policy consequences to the question of transgender pronouns. Those public policy questions all revolve around a central issue. Can subjective perception trump objective observation? What does that even mean? If the answer is yes, tyranny of the individual becomes the order of the day. No one was forcing them to let that individual do that, for the record. They could have told her to get out. Like, they would have faced boycotts from people who aren't there to begin with, who don't have memberships there to begin with. I'm scared, Ben. We all must bow before the subject's wants, needs, and desires of people who require special protection from life's realities. We must re-educate generations of people to ignore science in favor of feelings. He said the line, kind of. And also, actually look up brain scans for transgender people. I've mentioned that time and time again. look up them compared to the sex they were born as and the sex they wish to transition to. That is fascinating right there. We must strong arm individuals into abandoning central planks of their morality. No one's forcing you to do anything, Ben. In the name of sensitivity. Oh my god. You might get a boycott. That means you can't succeed in a free market. Oh my god. Wait, I thought you liked free markets. Now all of a sudden, this is like the weirdest, it's almost a reverse anti-discrimination proposal when you think about it. Because what Ben is saying is that private companies should always be required to discriminate against trans people. Now, that right there is one heck of a knockin' juggler. Is that a term? It's a term now. It's not just women who wish to avoid indecent exposure, it's doctors. Take, for example, a New York Times. I thought you hated the New York Times. Column this week by a transgender woman named Audra Longclean. Audra Longclean. I saw this tweeted out by Live Action. Oh my god. Titled, "My Vagina Won't Make Me Happy," argues that sex reassignment surgery, a growth in enthusiasm given that sex is not assigned in the first place, except by biology. Just had to throw in that extra part too. What would you prefer we call it, Ben? Give us your preferred name. Should be available to anyone based simply on want. Chu acknowledges that his new vagina is in fact not a vagina but a, quote, wound. That, quote, it will require regular and painful attention to maintain. Chu acknowledges that dysphoria has, quote, ballooned since I begun transition. Chu admits, okay, yeah, I really don't care. I was not suicidal before hormones, now I often am. Still, Chu says he should be given transgender surgery based simply on want. Well, if you've gone that far, then non-malification is principle violated in its very observation, Chu states. Its true purpose is not to shield patients from injury, but to install the medical professional as a little king of someone else's body. That actually is a little poetic. Okay, yeah, this one person wrote a column for a newspaper you hate. Give me your point. And even then, considering the person is going through reassignment surgery, it seems that she's pretty happy. Or at least would be happy to do it, or prefer to the alternative. Meanwhile, Twitter announced this week that it would seek to ban those who misgender or dead-name transgender people. In other words, if you note that Chelsea Manning or Caitlyn Jenner is a man, are men. For that record, can I just note that these people never assign that same worth to any other pen name. They never insist on calling any other author, for instance, their actual name as opposed to their pen. Didn't Clavin, who works on your website, use a pen name for like 4 books? How would referring to him by those, when he was writing under those, be any different than referring to a transgender person by what they prefer to be called now? Or you use the names Bradley or Bruce. With regard to the aforementioned transgender people, Twitter could ban you, they could already ban you technically, for repeated and or non-consensual slurs. So you will abide by subjective self-definitions, or you will be censored. You're not being censored if the government isn't doing this. We've been over this. Twitter recently banned a leftist... Oh, I know who you're talking about. Megan Murphy, I assume. She wasn't a leftist, she was a TERF. TERFs are social conservatives. I think she was a social conservative in general in many other areas. And honestly should be ignored. Also, it's interesting that you don't actually name Megan Murphy or show a link anywhere to that woman. This is like your laziest column so far, for merely noting that sex is biological and that men cannot become women. It doesn't stop there, as Walt Hires of The Federalist, that's your source, reports a Texas divorce case now pits a mother who dresses her 6-year-old male child, James, as a girl and calls him Luna against James's father, who she is accusing of child abuse for refusing to treat James as a girl. Hayer reports, quote, she is also seeking to require him to pay child visits to a transgender affirming therapist and a transgender medical alteration, which may include hormone sterilization starting at age 8. James, as it turns out, prefers to be called James and being treated as a boy by his father. That's not stopping Mom. Refusing to abide by the judgment of a 6-year-old, or in this case, a 6-year-old's mom, could mean losing your child in a world where we treat sex as malleable. First off, it wasn't the kid making this decision, it was his mother, so literally nobody is for this. Not a single person is for this if it's not the choice of the child. That's what we're for. God, this is... But okay, you found a crazy person in the state of Texas. Congratulations. They're a dime a dozen. It's Texas. There are real-world consequences to deliberate rewriting of basic biology. And the substitution of subjectivity for objectivity. Don't you believe in God? It means rewriting business operations, school curricula. In what manner? Medical treatment standards, censorship rules. You are the most overdramatic person I've come across that isn't named Dinesh D'Souza. I just want to make that clear. And even parenting. Sympathy for those who suffer from gender dysphoria is obviously proper. No one wants transgender people harmed or targeted. No one, really, not a single person out of the 7 billion people on this planet. But sympathy for a mental disorder should not trump either objective reality or competing priorities based on those objective realities. The Emperor's New Clothes is not a story about a wonderful sensitivity of a popularly educated on the subject desire rulers in clothes of satirical self-definition. Falsehood crumbles in the light of day, no matter how sympathetic we are to those who wish to perpetuate it, unless force becomes the order of the day. My God, you're annoying. I don't even want to call you a transphobe anymore, because that's probably what you want to be called. You're just wrong at this point. I'm Ephrom, and good night.